I had a weird feeling that the night was far from over for whatever reason.
Golly, man.
The loud knocking on the door spooked my senses as I contemplated for a while about whether or not I should open it.
Hello? Y'all remember SCP-294? It was a creepy coffee machine at a motel that was in a story called A Cup of Joe. It was an awesome animation and story done by Animated Horror Flicks, and he's got a part 2 out for it right now. It's not about the SCP, it's just a part 2 to that hotel, because the first one, he was telling the story from the perspective of the guy that actually started to own the hotel and renovate it. And now we've got a part 2 to follow up on. So make sure to head on over to Animated Horror Flicks' channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you like reaction videos like this, guys, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. Let's get into the animation. Nightmare at the Motel 2. I recognize this music from other animations.
It was the summer of 1991. At the old Glen Capri, which turned out to be the one dreaded summer I would care to forget. I had only just bought the place, and I hadn't gotten around to renovating anything yet, so the hotel was still pretty shabby and even a little creepy to some extent.
Right.
The doors and walls hadn't aged all that well, and it didn't have any decent air conditioning, except for the overhead fans, which didn't do all that much against the sweltering heat.
And that's crazy. I've stayed in hotels before. Well, I haven't stayed in hotels before. I didn't even realize that there were hotels that existed without air conditioning. It shows how small town minded I am, right? We went to Seattle for the first time, and there were restaurants and hotels that were built without air conditioning. Now, we stayed in a hotel that had a portable air conditioner for our first time we went to Seattle. And the second time that we went to Seattle, our friend stayed at a hotel without air conditioning at all. And it was that borderline time of year where it was pretty hot and uncomfortable. So that's so crazy to me because, I mean, it's 90 degrees over here in December sometimes, man, in South Louisiana. It's not something that we would ever live without in Cajun country. So the thought of that is so weird, man.
Fortunately, though, I had already received some guests at the motel, and it seemed like things were off to a pretty good start for the season.
Good.
I was actually getting ready to turn in when suddenly I heard the door to the reception close.
Okay.
I looked over to the entrance, but to my surprise, I couldn't see anyone leaving or entering.
Alright.
I got a strange, creepy feeling, which was suddenly elevated by the sound of heavy breathing that appeared to come from nowhere. It was rather faint, and it took me a minute to realize that it was coming from the other side of the reception desk.
Oh. Is it a kid?
I was startled by the sight of a slender hand suddenly clutching onto the desk.
Has to be a child.
It was only when I reached the other side of the desk that the whole situation became clear.
Yeah.
It was an old lady in a wheelchair asking for a room. I immediately asked how she arrived at the motel, to which she responded by pointing to a yellow taxi parked outside.
Alright.
I initially offered her a room on the first floor, but she insisted on having a room on the second floor despite being in a wheelchair, citing that she needed a room with a view.
Okay.
After mentioning that I didn't have any facilities to help her get to the second floor, she simply brushed it off and assured me that the taxi driver would take care of it. As I handed her the keys, I could tell she was the kind of person that, despite her age, insisted on doing as much by herself as possible and was very stubborn, but she paid for 3 nights in advance, so I was hardly going to argue.
Right.
Seeing the taxi drive off seemed like a good time to close up and try to catch up on a few hours of rest, while the other guests were sleeping, so I headed to one of the vacant rooms and turned in for the night.
Now that's pretty dang convenient too. You run a hotel, you get to stay somewhere rent-free. Most people that own hotels, I would imagine, have rooms located on property that they can just use as their personal space. Not necessarily live there permanently, but I know a lot of the hotels do facilitate their staff with places to stay. Because when you think about it, that's a heck of a job perk, man. You know, hey, listen, you get to work here, and by the way, if you want to stay here to live, you can. Bruh, you know how much money you could save if you don't have stuff to store? Man, that would be pretty good.
It was extremely warm that night, I remember, from all the tossing and turning, before eventually falling asleep and having the strangest of dreams.
I hate sleeping hot, man.
I remember approaching one of the rooms at the motel. As I got closer, I realized it was room 209, the very same room where the old lady in the wheelchair was staying.
Was that the same room?
The door was open and it felt like someone was pushing me forward or enticing me to come inside. I slowly pushed the door open further, which revealed the old lady sitting in her wheelchair beside the bed.
Why she looked like that?
Staring right at me.
Yeah.
She was frozen, trying desperately to express how afraid she was with just her eyes.
Oh no.
I was feeling some immense pressure on my chest as I could sense a dark presence in the room with us.
Right.
She kept looking briefly to her left as if someone was behind the door. But as I caught her glancing further to her left, I could tell it was something in her peripheral vision, almost behind her, that was causing her so much distress.
Oh.
To my horror, the door began to open by itself.
You saw the eyes? Oh, snap.
I had never felt so relieved to know that something that felt so real turned out to be just a dream.
Oh my gosh,
there was a residual feeling of intense anxiety that left me wondering why I was dreaming about that room and what it was that I saw standing in that dark corner.
Wasn't 209 the same room or next to the room that the crazy stuff went down with the coffee pot and Joe? I can't remember now.
For whatever reason, I instinctively got out of bed and peered through the window, where my eyes were instantly drawn towards room 209 at the other end of the motel. Everything seemed normal at first until I realized that one of the blinds was pulled down slightly, as if someone was staring back at me.
Peekaboo.
My initial reaction was that the old lady was also having trouble sleeping that night, but then I realized how absurd it was to suggest that an old lady in a wheelchair could even reach that high.
Right.
It looked like someone very tall was peering through the blinds, and it gave me this chill that instantly stifled the heat in my room. Suddenly, the gap in the blinds closed, which was followed by a strange silence. You know, the kind of silence that comes before the storm. I had a weird feeling that the night was far from over for whatever reason.
Golly, man.
The loud knocking on the door spooked my senses as I contemplated for a while about whether or not I should open it.
Hello? I mean, he could see somebody there.
Knocking on the door was not going to stop. I reluctantly opened it and was surprised to find another guest accompanied by her luggage, urging me to call for a taxi right away. I asked her what was wrong, and she replied by telling me that she was awoken by loud footsteps and commotion from the room above. And then she began to hear foul language and cursing to the point she had to pack her things and abandon her room.
Wow.
I offered her another room, but she wasn't interested, and just insisted on a taxi to get as far away as possible. I kind of thought she was overreacting, but she seemed genuinely freaked out, as if she had seen a ghost.
That is weird.
It was when I observed the keys to her room that I realized it was directly below room 209.
Wow.
The motel was practically empty at that point, and I didn't have an explanation for the noise, so I headed on over to room 109 to see if I could witness the disturbance for myself.
Now you got to think, as a guest there, when something like that happens, what would you have to hear to run you out of the hotel, grab a taxi, and go find something else in the middle of the night? You know, and as the hotel owner, you got to think, if there was a disturbance call from a certain room or coming from a certain room, you would have to investigate that, especially that you know that you just rented a room to some. I mean, you'd have to knock at the door. Do you take the chance of disturbing the guests? I mean, the other customer's already gone. I don't know, man. You would have to, I think. I think you just would have to bite the bullet and check it out. Doing this is probably the second best thing, which is going and just listening to see what's going on.
I sat at the end of the bed, listening closely, and it wasn't long before I could hear footsteps and other unsettling noises from above, almost as if things were being moved around.
Okay.
I thought that perhaps the old lady had received a visitor during the night, which could explain the footsteps and the person peering through the blinds, but what was with all the noise, and why do it so late at night?
Right.
The noise intensified and almost sounded like someone was being attacked, so I hurried upstairs and approached room 209.
Now at this point you have the right
knew without
to
a
knock,
doubt was the source of the uncanny disturbance.
Yeah.
There didn't seem to be much point in knocking to compete with the noise on the other side of the door, and I could sense that someone might be in danger.
So?
Fortunately, the doors to the motel were very old, so I managed to force my way in, hoping to come to the rescue, but instead, I was introduced to a room plunged into darkness and silence. The noise had stopped. I could see the old lady in her wheelchair beside the bed, just like in my dream, except she was slumped over and showed no signs of life.
Oh no.
She was cold to the touch and had no pulse, so I called the police, who later confirmed that she had died from heart failure.
Wow.
There were no signs of a struggle, and the only key to the room was on the table next to the window, so there couldn't have been anyone else in the room with her, so there was no suspicion of foul play.
But you had a dream. That's the freakiest thing about this. He had a dream of looking at the lady being scared of something behind her in kind of this exact scenario. That's so bizarre.
I told the police about the strange noises, but they refused to believe it was relevant to the cause of death.
Right.
In light of the evidence, or lack thereof, for that matter.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, I tried to put this whole thing behind me by making room 209 once again available to the guest. But every time I would prepare the room, I would find the furniture and other contents of the room scattered all over the place the following morning.
Weird.
The room directly below also proved to be uninhabitable due to the loud noises that could still be heard every night since the old lady passed away.
Bruh.
I still don't have a valid explanation for what happened that night. I can only speculate and hope to never experience anything like that again.
You have a haunted hotel. You just have a haunted motel, bruh. Room 209, y'all. The devil. The dang devil. Uh-huh. That was that dark figure that we saw earlier. Having another dream? Man, that gave me the chills, bruh. Oh, God! Oh, God, it scared the shit out of me. Oh, man. The Glen Capri animated horror flicks, y'all. That was very, very, very good, man. That jump scared the end. I was not expecting that at all. Not even a little bit, dude. Not even a little bit. And such a good story. Part 2. I have a feeling it's not the last of this hotel that we're gonna see. Room 209 at the Glen Capri, y'all. Animated horror flicks, guys. Make sure to check him out. Couple other videos that I reacted to him from here as well. Very, very talented guy. Make sure to subscribe to him. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off, and we'll see you next time.